Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Cradle Book 12, chapters 35, 36, 37, and maybe Epilogue, although I may save that to talk about for the wrap-up episode. In this episode, oh my god, you guys, so many possibilities if we wanted to keep going with this series. I'm not saying he should. I'm not saying he will. I'm not saying it's a good idea. But I am really, really going to miss this series. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Andy for commissioning this episode. And thank you, Andy, also for deciding to hold on to that extra episode and let me do a wrap-up, because it's looking more and more like that was a great idea, even though I was like, yeah, I can refund you your money if you don't want to do that. Andy had a lot more foresight than I did and was like, nay, let us remain, and we shall see. So just for an FYI, I said at the opening that I was not sure if I was going to cover the epilogue. I may do that next time, but I definitely won't be covering the bloopers because I have not read them yet. I am going to do what I did last time, I think. Or maybe the book before. One of them, I read the bloopers live on camera for the first time. And I think I'm just going to do that again because that was pretty fun. And that draws everything out as much as possible. And I want to let everyone know at the beginning of this that if you are interested in joining the Discord and going to you could leave comments either in the Cradle No Spoilers or Cradle Spoilers channel at this point. It won't matter because I'm going to allow myself to go into the spoiler channel. I'll probably I probably, when I finish shows, should start to delete the No Spoilers channel, because the whole point of the No Spoilers is for there to be a place where I can talk about what I have covered so far, but no further. Once I've covered everything, all the spoilers will still be in the quote no spoilers channel. So it's not even a good place for new readers to go, because they could be spoiled by what's in it if they're at the beginning of the series. So not totally sure how I should handle that, I'll be honest. But if you're here, I'm going to put the link to the Discord in the chat. And if you're interested in there being any particular information that you want me to cover in the wrap-up episode that wasn't included in the original material, if you have a question that you would like for me to ask or answer, I guess really, in this wrap-up episode, post it there so that I have a little bit of time to think it over, maybe. If I am so inclined to think ahead, I'm not guaranteeing anything. Just in general, stuff that you think would be of interest for the wrap-up. Leave it in one of the Discord Cradle channels, and I will try to see to it that I touch upon whatever it is that you leave. And now let's begin. Let's get started on this bitch. So I said last time that I was really interested to see what Zeal's deal was going to be, because I know that he's supposed to be protecting, but it felt like that's what all of our friends are doing. So exactly what would that look like for Zeal? How would it be different for him than it would be for Yaren or Mercy? And the answer is laws. I'm so sorry, bruh. Oh my God. Zeal has to write laws and regulations and appoint public officials. I mean, ew. Literally kill me. I swear to God, it's such a perfect choice because, like, when you think of shields, you think about the like physical aspect, but the laws put into place to protect us are extremely important. This is the sort of thing, like, I'm going to go off on another political tangent here, as I so often will do, but honestly, Will White really, like, baits me. He brings this upon himself. So if he doesn't want to hear it, I'm sorry, Will. I know you listen to every episode of my show several times each, but I'm going to do this. There is a reason for regulation. Every single regulation that we have got surrounding labor, surrounding product safety, all of those are, as they say, written in blood. We don't, as a country, enforce regulations until there are many deaths resulting from the lack of them. And even then, gun control, anybody? So I am really delighted, honestly, with the decision that he made of, oh, you know what we're going to do? We're going to have the, I'm going to try and protect you to keep this from having to happen again, be some real boring bureaucracy shit that he is going to hate doing. He's going to drag his feet on. Nobody's going to appreciate it. It's for the greater good. It's necessary. It's going to probably work a lot better than just leaving them to their own devices, based on what Dross says. If they were to just leave, we're giving them 20 more years and then they're going to do the same shit again. And all of this is correct, in my opinion, according to what we all know of human nature. I mean, let's be perfectly real for a minute here. We do not learn from our mistakes. We don't. We make the same mistakes every 20 years, I would say. We have a small period where we, like, start to improve on something, and then we get real complacent and think we've got it all figured out, and then pretty soon slide back into bad habits or actively retread, like, completely go in the wrong direction, and you'll look up and be like, I thought we had made progress, what the fuck? And it's it's such a shame because, like, I really, it doesn't have to be like this. That's the way it is for me with all of the things that we have the information and we have the ability, the technology, the science, the evidence to support. But for whatever reason, folks don't want to listen. And I saw a tweet the other day talking about how, I think it was during maybe World War II, where there had been, like, rationing on electricity. And so people were having to, like, turn off all of their electronic devices or whatever for several hours each night in order to help with the electrical grid and preserving fuel. And there was a tweet saying, the thing that gets me is how we'll talk about all these sacrifices that people would make for the war effort. But if anybody were asking us to do this today, people would be going and buying Christmas lights to deck their houses out in the middle of July, just to fucking make a point that you can't tell me what to do, even though it's, like, for all of our good, you know? And that's the energy to me that hit the most, is, like, we will talk with fondness about these, like, eras, and, well, you wouldn't do that now. People wouldn't even get vaccinated, for Christ's sake. Nobody wants to believe that vaccines work anymore. So how are we going to learn if we have, like, tons of physical evidence that this shit is legit and changed our whole trajectory as a species? But now people are trying to say, well, it's not real. It's definitely got microchips or nanobots or will make you sicker or is just a conspiracy or whatever. How are we ever going to progress, guys? I don't know how we do it. How do we keep taking backward steps? Where are we going? What are we gonna? How are we gonna get better? I don't know what the answer is. So, all this to say, first we start off with Zeo finding out that there used to be people living on Cradle's moon, which I say used to be because Dross is pretty certain, due to the Weeping Dragon's breath hitting it, that they're dead. I mean, Will, did you really have to? Why did you have to, sir? You didn't have to. That's really not necessary. But he lands in this world, and there is something called the world line that goes around basically the equator of the planet, and it is what I think of as sort of like a Samara's ring sort of situation, where it glows and it's a power source, and it's almost completely gone. And the person that he meets is a woman who is apparently a anthropologist. What a thankless job, honestly, at this point. And she immediately, where's your ship? Is this your real form? How many people can you take? How soon? And are you going to eat us? And he has to calm her down and get her to believe that he is indeed a human being here to help. And then she says, I can't believe the Exodus theory was actually right. Did humans originate here and travel the stars, or were we placed here from your planet? Do all humans on your planet have horns? And I really liked this because it struck me as the kind of thing that, like, probably a human on our planet would be asking. It's the sort of thing where, and I had already mentioned before, the fact that so many of the iterations that we had seen so far were aware of there being beings that were not of their same exact race. And so anytime we're running across people who aren't sure but still are calling out for help, I think that's really interesting. But here, the idea is so, like, her talking about Exodus theory and, like, did human beings start with us? I love how self-centered that is. She does ask then, or were we placed here by you? But there's no consideration of, like, well, one, maybe he doesn't know. Two, did they start with us? I mean, imagine ever considering that your planet was the very first one of a species of people. Like, just knowing what we know of how many iterations are out there, the idea of assuming that about your planet is so arrogant, even though, like, I would probably ask the same question because I'm coming from the same complete lack of perspective that she is. But I just couldn't help but laugh because it really, like, struck me as I was reading it. Wow, this is not about you, you know? And when he won't answer, she's like, are you worried about altering our technological development? Which is a thing that so many people who are, like, into the concept of UFOs and aliens among us and whatnot, it's like, oh, they don't make contact officially because they don't want to alter our timeline. They just want to observe. And, you know, what I just really like that there has been a whole thing recently with, like, the US and our admissions of maybe potentially, possibly, in theory, hiding a project that involved UFOs and extraterrestrial beings. And because everybody's in such a state of, like, yeah, but I can't afford groceries, nobody cares. Everybody is just like, yeah, whatever. I need to pay my fucking electric bill. Like, can you focus on anything that's actually relevant to me? So all of this, her, like, asking all these questions, and I'm just thinking to myself, girl, focus. Y'all are about to, like, have your whole planet collapse in. Just chill for a second. So he tells her that we will be able to restore your world line and that the animal population will be recreated once that is fixed. But she doesn't seem super excited about this. She says, oh, huh. What happens when we drain it again? Y'all, this was like being punched in the gut because she doesn't say if, she just says when. This is a realism bitch right here. She knows exactly what assholes her people are, and she is not trying to play. So he tells her, I'm supposed to come back and kill the ones responsible. She lifted her head and brightened. Really? That's perfect. Do we put out another stress signal for you, or do you have your own way of detecting this? Can I give you their names now? This bitch said, let me narc on all of them. And I am here for this energy. Please, more of this. Oh my God, you guys. Oh, this spoke to my soul. And don't get me wrong. If I were in her position, I couldn't give names because God knows. I mean, there are so many people responsible for how fucking bad things are with our planet right now. Did you guys see that there are water temperatures off the coast of Florida right now that are over 100 degrees? We've got whole coral reefs in that area. 100% death rate. The entire reef dead because the temperature of the water is so absurdly high. I mean, we're hitting records for the heat in the water at this point. I don't know how many people know this, but we get like a fair amount of our oxygen from water plants. And, you know, food sources, entire ecosystems, like, that's not awesome for us. And I can't believe this is happening in my lifetime. If I were her, I would really feel the same exact way. I just need to formulate a list. I just want to put together a list. So that's another thing that y'all can add to the Discord. If you know of the names of the people who are in charge of some of the, you know, bigger CO2 emissions, oil spills, you know, some of the major unnatural disasters, I would be cool with including those folks on my paperwork to the Abaddon. I'm just saying. So Zeal considered his options. He wanted to protect these people, and preemptively killing the people who would be responsible for the world's decay seemed counterproductive. Does it, though? You know, I'm just asking. Does it? Why? Why is that counterproductive? You're protecting everybody on this planet from the monsters who are so greedy and irresponsible that they are going to kill everybody again if they can. I really don't see the problem. I'm just saying. I'd be fine with it. You know, he's asking, like, don't you have some monsters I could kill? Yeah, they do, though. She says, no, sorry, but they do. It seems to me. I don't know. I'm just spitballing. Kill them, maybe. I'm not mad about it. At this point, I've kind of had it. So, yeah, go ahead. Dross says, boy, she must enjoy murder. Sometimes. Maybe a little. Occasionally for reasons. I am not enjoying the murder itself. Simply the result. You know, whatever. Anyway. So, he begins his work, and then we go to Linden Ascending. This is wild, you guys. So, I'm not entirely certain what's going on here. We have him ascend to a world that isn't usually supposed to be where ascensions go. And it turns out what they're attempting to do is actively, I think, if I'm understanding this correctly, pull people in who would normally end up with the Abaddon. They're attempting to waylay them because they are not fans of the Abaddon and are, I don't know what they are doing after this. If it's like, we're going to keep you in a holding cell until you agree to do what we say, or we're going to take you somewhere and like brainwash, re-educate, whatever you want to call it, or we're going to bring you somewhere, determine your power level, and if we can control you, we will, and if not, we kill you. I'm not really entirely certain what their goal is here. Like, are they working with the Vroshir, or are they just anti-Abaddon and inadvertently assisting the Vroshir? I am assuming that they're in with the Vroshir because of the Silver Lord that turns up, who seems to be keeping an eye on them in a way that feels like the guy tries to say, I didn't know there was one here, but I feel like it seems there is some sort of symbiotic relationship there. He just didn't seem... It's like the kind of thing where it's like they're technically working together, but he doesn't want to admit to it. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. Evil says these worlds are dominated by the Vroshir. Jan says, I got the impression that they think they're good guys, anti-Abaddon good guys. That's kind of how I thought. Andy says they view it that they're saving people from the tyranny of the Abaddon. Most people won't object because they have no connection to any faction. It's Lyndon's close connection to the Abaddon that sets him up for conflict. That's what sort of... Evil says they believe the message their dominators tell them, which is that the Abaddon are the bad guys. So, so Evil, you're saying basically, like, they've been fed a bunch of propaganda, which definitely makes sense. Because, like, honestly, you guys know, I was pretty willing to believe that maybe the Vroshir might have a point. Several books back, there was a part of me that did feel like, yeah, all right, well, how come the Abaddon are in charge, though? Like, who decided that? And nobody gets to, like, ask any questions about it? Like, maybe there are better ways. It doesn't seem like they are a perfect organization, but they also seem really, really resistant to change, so maybe they have some points. Once you get to know exactly how the Vroshir operate, I'm like, all right, no, they're no better. Even if they had a point, they suck worse, at least. So, but I could kind of see how it would be easy for the Vroshir to come in and be like, those people are just tyrants who take people who ascend for their own purposes and don't even like give them a chance. And that's not even entirely untrue, really, you know? I mean, it seems like it's sort of a default situation that if you ascend, if nobody grabs you, the Abaddon get you, and that's sort of the deal. It's like a direct pipeline. So, yeah. Jan says the Mad King isn't representative of all the Vroshir. No, but that's the thing. Like, you know, Machiel wasn't the representative of all the Abaddon, but he fucking blew. So, you know, the old argument, same thing. So anyway, this encounter is really interesting because at first they're really friendly, cheering for Lyndon coming through. They do this thing where they have like a construct that helps them to translate and understand each other. Things seem like they are like on a good foot. And then there is this like moment where Lyndon asks if they're one of the Abaddon. And he says, no, I'm not with them. And you should thank the void you ended up in a united realm. They've been enslaving people from your world for thousands of years. Most of you end up with us eventually, but only after the Abaddon have squeezed you dry. Which, I do want to know a little more about that. Like, there's a kernel in there that feels like maybe there's something, I want to know about it. That's all I'm saying is perhaps we could start some sort of internal investigation. Just a maybe. But anyway, Dross suggests hiding the marble in his pocket, which immediately Grith is able to grok. I was going to say Glock, that's a gun. Grok the fact that Lyndon is starting to hide it, and he says, "What have you got there?" Apologies if I startled you. I was only putting my belongings in order. Well, apologies right back at you, but this is my job. You can show me now, or I'll find it later. I can see everything in your void space, and I should be able to see everything in your pocket. And finally, he shows it to him, and as soon as Grith sees it, "Now, who gave you that?" "He's calling for help," Dross said. So what ensues is a fight in which Lyndon holds back mightily until shit really begins to go left. And all of a sudden, here comes a Silver Lord. Lyndon tries to tell Grith, "I'm willing to just go if you want to drop it right now." But they are not willing to drop it right now. So, Silver Lord arrives. I'll see if they're more willing to talk. So, he goes up to talk to this woman who has a raven's head on its shoulder. On her shoulder. And when she hears that he was like ascending from cradle but wound up here, she says, "Yeah, it's kind of a mess. Nobody can tell where ascensions are going to turn out anymore. Let's just pack those weapons away and we can talk." But then he pulls the marble up and says, "How much trouble is this going to get me in?" And she says, "Well, it depends. Who gave it to you?" And he at first tells her Curran of the Hounds, and her bird squawks. And she's like, "Yeah, that's not true. So are you going to be real with me, or are we going to have a problem?" "Suriel gave it to me." "Do you know what that means?" "Not fully." "It means I've got to take you with me." The Silver Lord was still casual, but she suddenly radiated an air of menace. And then, Uncle Fury shows up. You guys, I am so delighted for him to be back. We didn't get enough of him. It was the right amount, but I love Akura Fury so much. He's so delightful that I always want a little bit more of him. You guys, I mean, what a delightful freak show this guy is. Just a complete maniac for fighting. I love it so much. He's so excited when for a moment he thinks Lyndon is challenging him and that maybe they might get to fight. And because Lyndon's asking how long has it been and how strong are the others here? He hadn't seen Yaren and the others in almost 2 years. The Abaddon assured him it had been mostly the same amount of time up here, but mostly didn't reassure him. And Fury tells him most of the Abaddon that aren't wolves are not worth your time. Make sure they're at least 2-star if you want a challenge. Silver Lords aren't bad, but they're all different. Good for variety, but you never know when one will be a challenge or not. None of the judges will fight me, not even Ethan. He says I need to get stronger before I challenge him. Despite his disappointment, Lyndon thought the man looked excited. And I do really love... We knew that he was bored on Cradle because he had ascended so far that there was never anybody he could fight that was on his level. So the idea now that there's somebody he can look forward to fighting in his distant future that he's not even up to yet, that must be a pretty fun change, I mean, this is the thing about being somebody who isn't like Northstrider, where he enjoyed being the big fish in a small pond so much. It was no longer about improving himself. It was about being the authority and the power and the badass. Akura Fury. I always want to call him by the first name, which I think of as the first name but that's not the way. He is so focused on self-improvement in a way that's really, really similar to Lyndon, but Lyndon is driven by it used to be a self-loathing. I'm not totally sure if that's really it anymore, but there's definitely just a bottomless greed as well, hence the Void Sage. Whereas Fury, it's just fun. He is driven by the constant desire to have fun. And every time he levels up, that shortens the fun, puts him in a slightly smaller box. And it's a really interesting concept to think about. The thing that you do for fun, the more you do it, the more difficult it makes it for you to continue to do that thing for fun. You know, I don't know. I just I really love this, but I really feel for him in a weird way, you know? So, they head to the 8th Division, and I love that he says, Ethan's cleaned up the place a lot. I'm sure by this time next year, it will look like a golden hairbrush. Apparently, finding out that Ethan was a celestial executioner still hadn't fixed Fury's opinion of him. I'll be real, I had forgotten that Fury was so disapproving, because he was so angry at Ethan throwing the fight in the Uncrowned King tournament. Completely forgot. That is really hilarious. I love that he is just yeah, he's Osriel, the ender of worlds, whatever. Guy's a fucking himbo. So this is when we have a really great reunion. First we have Yaren and them kissing and this long drawn out. It's so great. Eventually Orthos and Little Blue are like, hey, let us in. I love Dross being like, I'm back too. And everybody's like, Dross, I'm sorry, bud, but you've been here. And one of his other selves is like, I missed you. And he gets all teary-eyed. So Mercy comes up, hugs him, and Lyndon then says, did someone say, where's Ethan? Guys, this is so great. I love this the most. Lyndon gets teary and says, hello, Ethan. I missed you. Ethan's smile shook, and he hugs him and says, thank you. And Lyndon realizes he's sobbing and is like, are you okay? I wasn't prepared to be so proud. You used my shampoo. That really caught me off guard. I should have seen it coming. Oh, it's so dumb. I love it. I love it so much. This is great. So then Mercy's like, do you have any messages for us? And it turns out Lyndon brought Pride with him in his void key. Not the only person, but that's the one for now. He's still at Underlord, which Ethan's like, that's weird. And Pride is like, it's really not, actually. You guys are weird. I am really normal, actually. So if you could just not sound like I'm some sort of freak who doesn't advance every hour and a half, that'd be great. And Mercy tackles Pride so hard in trying to greet him that she sends him flying into another planet practically, and she has to restore him. And then when Ethan is done being like, wow, only Underlord, sad, pathetic, he looks at Fury and is like, well, he's gonna need some training. And Fury is extremely stoked, grabs Pride up, and runs off to a training facility with him. So then We have gifts Lyndon's brought for Yaren. The sword. A core of white winter steel, carrying willpower to the black metal around it. The edge was a bright, bloody crimson, and the whole thing radiated an endless scarlet light. Its guard was a pair of swept-back phoenix wings. And that sounds like it looks awesome. I would love to see an illustration of this. And then, when she says it's like it was forged for my hand, Dross is like, actually, now that you mention something made for your hand, and Lyndon takes out a ring set with a small rainbow diamond. And this is where the piece of the diamond that Emrys had pulled it out and been like, he couldn't at least have left me the whole fucking diamond. What the shit? This is what he did with it. I love this. And he's like, I knew you'd like the sword. I don't know about this. But she slides on the ring. Ethan, you know, in some cultures, giving a woman a ring is done when you propose a duel. When you propose a duel. Shut up, Ethan. Stop it. And I really appreciate it. There's no, like, necessarily... I mean, we know that they get married on Cradle. Like, there are husbands and wives. There was talk about the Sword Sage potentially being engaged to the Winter Sage. So, like, it's not a thing, but this isn't exactly what's happening here, even though it's very clearly the understanding, you know? But I like that it's not, will you marry me? It's not that. It's just, like, kind of, we know this, it's us, we're together. Like, there's no question. I'm going to give you this symbol, and you know what it means, and we don't need to do the thing. And I'm very cool with that. That's fine. But speaking of the Winter Sage, so he opens the void key and lets her out. He doesn't warn Yaren, and this bitch just comes out sobbing, crying. And I was just like, honestly, this didn't feel like a good... Lyndon had been thinking he would save this for later, and I'm like, you really should have. I don't personally feel like this was... No, but it's too late. And it turns out a lot of her sect has come with her. Dross says all of them who wanted to come anyway. Some of them had lives and families. At this point, Yaren's like, how much did you fit in that fucking thing? And he looks at Ethan and is like, hey, do you mind if I build like a little addition to, you know, your thing? It'll be big. And Ethan's like, yeah, it will. Yeah, it will. Do it. Do it. And it turns out Lyndon brought the whole labyrinth. I can't imagine. Bringing together the sections separated all over the world wasn't as hard as you'd expect. The hard part was doing it without causing devastating local earthquakes. So yeah, because like there had been a point where Dross was saying it's too bad we didn't finish looking through the whole, oh my god, labyrinth. I lost the word for a second there, guys. And Lyndon's thinking something and Dross can't see it. And he's like, are you blocking me? What the fuck? And it turns out it was this, that Lyndon was trying to figure out a way that they could just bring it with them. Why not? Sure. So then we have this nice moment between him and Suriel where she's like, he's explaining to her what the marble meant and how much it helped him like stay kind of focused and remind him of the scope of the world at large and just keep his perspective about everything that was happening, which really helped motivate him to getting up into the heavens. And she is really pleased. Like, it's clear when she left this for him, it wasn't her plan for it to be such a central part of how things went down. And it just worked out that way. But, I I really do like him asking her about herself. We don't get to find that out. And I'm really curious, like, if there's a reason why Will decided not to tell us, if it's simply for the sake of time. I have no doubt personally that Will has a plan for her in place already, that he is like, has a bunch of notes about the course of her life and how things went down. But I am just wondering if he like had included that story and then decided to cut it because it was just sort of slowing everything down. If there's like a side series he was thinking he might do, or if there's like a, you know, complete guide to the Cradle universe or the Abaddon or something that he's going to write and he's keeping it for that. I just wondered about it. Because like I said, I have no doubt he knows the answer to these questions, that he has all of her backstory. So this is when we go to chapter 37. They call that a class 2 fiend, Dross said to Lyndon. I heard it would be ugly, but I was not prepared. Do you think you could fight it without looking at it? And this thing is one of the Elder Empire deals. It's so gross. A living island with 1 million squirming limbs. It squirmed in a way that hurt Lyndon's eyes. Ew. A country-sized beast floating over the central planet of this iteration. Can you imagine anything the size of a country floating above our planet? And then make it something that is itself alive? No. Count me out. I've said it before, and I will say it again. Knock it off with this, Will. Stop it. It's gross. You're gross. So, Abaddon are overwhelmed, and this fiend had been contacted by the world's inhabitants. It was the natural fate of this world to be eaten one piece at a time by Chaturniak, devourer of dimensions. I mean, honestly, who called this thing? Who did it? Raise your hand. We're not going to be mad. Just tell us. Christ, some asshole like a fucking Raygon Shen type who thought they could control it. Somebody who was like, I'll be in charge of it. I'll rule the world because this fucking country-sized fiend will definitely listen to what I have to say. I swear to God, I'm so over it. No, stop it with all of this summoning shit. Ugh. Anyway, I just can't imagine what anybody wanted with this thing. So the world is already losing its place in the way. Like, the void is almost completely closed in on the whole planet. Half of the planet was already erased. The fiend was closing in on the remaining population, leaving them for last so it could feed on the existence of their world as long as possible. Which, that's fucked up. To be like, it's like if you lived on your dinner, you know, imagine that. Like, your house was also a delicious, piping hot stuffed crust cheese pizza. And you're just like delighting in eating it, but also you can't go too fast because as soon as you finish it, you don't have anything to stand on anymore and the planet is just gone. That's a real conundrum. That sucks. I personally would probably keep the crust. I want the sauce, so I'll eat the middle and then I'll just keep the crust as a nice big sort of halo shaped planet that I can traipse about on. I think that's how I'd handle it. Anyway, this thing has gotten so far that everybody on the planet is like, well, we are definitely going to die. So there's not hope left. There's no assumption that there is even anybody who exists who could beat this thing. This wasn't an opponent he could simply wipe out. The Weeping Dragon's sword formation spread out above him, and Wave Dancer unleashed a golden dragon's breath that pierced through space in an instant. There's in an instant again, guys. Lyndon supplemented it with bars of black flame from each hand. Any one of those attacks would have been enough to scorch the remaining population of this iteration. They only tickled the Devourer of Dimensions. And that is so devastating. It's like basically the equivalent of like just kind of, poking somebody in the side. It would be enough to completely kill all of the people that are left, though. Brutal. So the attacks begin. Lyndon is like really not used to fighting something of this type. So the way it attacks, it's just very weird, The dragon descends smashed into the warped chaos of flesh that formed the fiend's body. Forged dragon claws detonated, blasting Cheturniac thousands of miles into empty space. But Lyndon wasn't unscathed either. The creature's return stroke cracked his armor and sent him plummeting into the planet's remaining atmosphere. And he tries to stop himself with the use of authority, but it is not enough. And I am assuming also that maybe, and I'm not positive about this, that maybe authority is a little bit weaker in places where the void is creeping in super quickly. But he gets caught by somebody wearing a gold crown and a blue and silver cloak. And this dude is a lot stronger than Lyndon was expecting and helps to slow him down. Dross is telling him that's a prince. He's significant to the world's fate. One might argue that he was responsible for Cheturniac being summoned in the first place, which I'm real curious about that. If you say one might argue, what it sounds like you're saying to me is that technically that's not really true and it's a little unfair, but if we're going to hold somebody responsible, it's going to be the ruler of the place. That's the way I took it. But yeah, Lyndon is like, I'm really glad you stopped me from falling because if I crashed into a city, that would have killed a lot of people. And the prince is like, dude, all of us are practically dead already. Like, it wouldn't have mattered. And you might be the only one left worth saving. If I thought so, I wouldn't be here. We have about 30 seconds, Dross informed him, give or take any teleportation shenanigans. I saw your battle, the prince said. Can you kill it? That's what I'm here to do. Once I kill it, we can return your world to what it was before. Even most of the dead can be restored. The story of this world is not over yet. The prince's face crumpled as though he were about to cry, but he shed no tears. His hands balled into fists, and he seemed as though he were about to speak. Something over Lyndon's shoulder caught his attention, and the despair returned to his eyes. How can you face that? The prince asked. That's not an enemy, that's the end. Lyndon lifted into the air and turned to face the fiend. Dark fire kindled in his hand. No, Lyndon said. I am the end. The end of the Cradle series. Guys, this asshole writer managed to make the final words of the book the end. I hate you so much, Will. Fuck you, dude. Granted, that's not counting the epilogue, but still, I see you. I see what you did. Okay. So I had said I would maybe save the epilogue for next time, but I have 8 minutes. I think we're good. So I'm going to go and talk about it now. So we are going to iteration 001 Sanctum, the Grave. And we've got this kid named Liren. And he is 7 years old. And he is Lyndon and Yaren's son. He's 7 years old today. And it says he and his family didn't live here all the time, but they could sometimes stay for months. I really wonder what it's like where he does live. His father has promised him a birthday present, but Liren's dad is so into training that a lot of the time what he says is a present is just work with a bow on it. Which, can I get a show of hands of parents who were like that? Because my dad was so like that. My mom understood what a present should be like. But my dad really did not understand the concept of like being like free time, really. You know, he didn't fully get it. So he's got a present that he found in his room, and he knows who left it, and he's like carrying it with him, even though he should have left it there. And as he's like sprinting through the halls, somebody grabs him up, and it's his mom. Looking to crack your skull, are you? Where are you galloping to? His father's voice echoed down the halls. I called him. Liren's parents could hear anything from anywhere. He sometimes envied children who could get away with things. His instinct was to hide the present he carried behind his back to keep it secret, but he didn't bother. She'd have seen it. So, when she says to Lyndon, it's your time to burn, already told you it's a rotten trap of a test, how many of you figured out what she was talking about? I didn't see it coming, and I felt like such a ding-dong. Once we get there, and he starts to be like, it's just a bowl of Madra, I'm like, oh, Dadoy, I swear to God, I didn't even think of it. I was like, I felt so stupid. So, Lyndon, there are uses for it. It's not a bad starting point for training if you do it right. Liren froze at the word training. Don't twist yourself in knots. Wouldn't call it training. If you put a sword to my neck, I'd call it a game. She was no better than his father when it came to training. She would call running up a mountain with a monster strapped to his back a fun game. And he says cheers and celebrations for me. I love him taking, like, I said this already with when we met the sword sage in his echo. I loved like him and Yaren having a similar way of speaking, and I love it again here. I just, you know, I really enjoy little nods to the way we learn things. It's from our mentors, our authority figures, you know. I just really enjoy this a lot. So she takes the present for him and opens it, but then, for shame, don't you think he's old enough to open his own presents? I taught you better than that. His mother shut the box again, grumbling to herself. She held it up to Liren. Give this back to you after I see what the other tricks, traps, and trouble he left in here. Now go see your father. So he stepped in, and there is the room is like spherical inside. Got tons of stuff, all kinds of dangerous shit. Distant voices whispered from a sealed box. Half-finished suits of armor tried to animate themselves, but were held back by glowing restraints. A spiritual pressure forge, a massive machine that took up one wall, groaned to life. It compressed energy into glowing gemstones, and it was the number one device that Liren wanted to use himself one day. This is really fascinating, and I want to know all about all of them. So he's got this bowl, and he fills it with Madra. When I was your age, I had to take a test. And apparently he's heard this story before and is like, oh, God, this again. Okay. It's clearly very important. It's different this time. I'm going to focus. I want you to remember this is a tool. It doesn't tell you where you will end up. It helps us to see where you're going to begin. All you have to do is put your hand into the bowl and cycle your madra. It's not going to hurt? No. What's going to happen? It's even safer than a bowl of water. That soothed Liren's worries. His parents had strange ideas about training and fun, but they wouldn't tell him something was safe when it wasn't. They'd be too concerned about his safety in Liren's view. So he puts his hand in. Then he felt a reaction from his cores, plural. Two similar but subtly different forms of power flooded up his arm and resonated with the fluid energy in the bowl. The liquid erupted. One half burst into rapidly forming crystals, like a violent ocean spray freezing at the moment of its creation. The other half dissolved into a cloud of steam dissipating into the air. This is so cool, you guys. He jerked his hand back, leaving a disappearing cloud of blue-white and a sculpture that resembled a frozen tree. The ice, which Liren supposed was really forged madra, only covered one half of the dish. It slowly lost balance, tipping over to one side. "What does that mean?" Liren asked nervously. "That means it's time to make your own badge." And that's the end. You guys, I love this so much. I don't remember what the results of the test were, because I remember it was like you only got to... It's so weird to think about now, you guys. Like, remember how it was basically you got to be a striker or you got to be a forger? Like, now we've got striker techniques, we've got forger techniques, we've got all kinds of like... But at Sacred Valley, they thought you could only be like the one thing, which is just banana pants. And also, all of them were working with like such reduced levels of aura and therefore madra and power, that the result of putting their hand in the bowl would be way more subtle than somebody who's working with the kind of power this kid probably has access to. Like, he's growing up with parents that are so utterly powerful. He's probably got access to some of the most advanced treasures and whatnot to aid him in cycling and growth. So he'll probably be way more advanced than most kids his age at this point already. And I just really am fascinated by this combo of powers. Hot enough to turn it into steam on one side, cold enough to freeze it on the other. I have to assume that his cores aren't necessarily, like, are they both full of pure madra? Has he chosen a path already? I'm assuming not, and that's part of what the test is about. But I don't know. I'm very curious about it, and it makes me crazy knowing that we're never going to find it out. Asher is talking about parents who take things a little too seriously. Yep, my parents gave me things like summer debate camp and a car that I was required to get a job to earn, which both are great and all. I'm not trying to say they're not, but when you almost never get anything frivolous, it can grind your gears a bit. Yeah, it was sort of a weird thing for me growing up and seeing like parents giving their kids cars and stuff, and I was always just like, what is that like? Eventually, I got a job and my dad gave me an old beater car, but I had lived out of the house and paid my own like rent and groceries all that summer. So he was really buying the car with the money that he wasn't spending on me while I was doing this like paid internship thing, which doesn't exactly like it. I earned that car, really. If I had been living at home, that's how it would have gone. So that was the one thing that my dad really like sprang for. But otherwise, yeah, I had to get a job while I was in high school and participate in all clubs. And they were very focused on like making sure I had the resume for applying to college, which worked. I won't say it didn't. When I finally applied to colleges, my school that I went to required us to apply to at least 15 schools, which I think about now and like, it's insane. And the money we had to spend on application fees alone, like I had to get financial aid just to pay for the applications. But I got into all 15 schools that I applied for, and I got full ride offer on one and half scholarship for all 4 years on another. So like, them pushing me, it did work out, but I also never finished college because I was not, so who can tell? Asher says 15, that's an insane requirement. Yeah, it was indeed. And I wish I had gone to Oberlin and not Carnegie Mellon, but I was too dazzled by the Carnegie name. Oberlin was willing to do a full boat, and they were just far enough away and just unknown enough for me to kind of be like, I don't know about this. Anyway, this is not the Natasha's History podcast. I feel like most of my podcast is basically, though, so it's fine. You guys, I can't remember. I think it was Evil that said how Will talked about really valuing a completed story. I really feel very satisfied with this. I really do. The fact that he values it shows a lot. And there's a sense for me of a sort of, you're not like getting a Animal House sort of freeze frame where you get, this is what somebody goes on to do. That's fine. But you get a sense, and Lyndon and Yaren having kids, at first I was kind of like, are we really doing like, oh, here's the child thing? Because that felt a little the end of Harry Potter. Like, this is the epilogue, At the same time, first of all, this is done a lot better because he isn't named Severus. But it also felt like the way that things are going for this kid, we were in his head in a way that felt like it was about him and not about Lyndon. And I liked that handling of it. And overall, it's just fun to know that they're out here like handling all of the terrifying beings out there now, and how much hope they're bringing to people. The scene with the prince and him being overwhelmed with the idea that even the dead could be brought back really got to me a little bit, because like, why would you ever think that would be possible? So the news, how that must feel to hear, it was kind of moving, Yeah, I don't know. I really, really liked this ending. I really enjoyed Ethan's reunion with Lyndon. And I am, the only thing that I'm kind of curious about is where they're actually living. If the grave isn't their home, where is then? Is it another windfall kind of thing? Do they have like a small planet that is their home, or like that they've created, or a spaceship, something like that? I'm very, very curious. Asher says also that they've been doing this executor thing long enough to have a kid and still haven't gone insane like everyone was predicting. Oh my God. That's true. I didn't even think about that. Although I don't know how long it's supposed to be that they would function before going insane. I feel like it was supposed to be kind of a while and then it would start to happen, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't even know, but that's true. So yeah, if folks are going to hop on that Discord, chime in and let me know what you think about the ending and how you felt with the like satisfaction levels from 1 to 10. How happy were you with it? Because I'm at a solid 9. Like, there's a few other things that I would like to know. Lyndon's family, I'm assuming all had stayed behind because they were pretty ambivalent. Like, his sister was, I'm going to earn my way. His parents seemed not that interested. I'm not really worried about them or concerned about them. Living situation, little curious, wondering about honestly, the Winter Sage being here was kind of weird. I felt like that was... I'm not mad about it, but I don't really care about it either. Jan, thank you for bringing that up. Jan says, I want to know about Kelsa's present. And I was thinking that too with the last one. And I meant to bring it up because Lyndon makes stuff for the 8-Man Empire after telling Kelsa that in his current state, he can't soulsmith too well. So clearly he had healed enough by then to do stuff, but we don't see what he makes for her. And I really would have liked to see not only what he made, but see her receiving it. That would have been fun because I just feel like Kelsa's kind of gotten screwed a few times. And I don't have as much of a grudge against her as his parents. His parents had a responsibility that his sister didn't. And she really did try to do as right by him as she could, considering the power structure of their clan. So I like her, and I would have liked to see her set up. But, you know. Evil says, I'm happy but disappointed. I really think Lyndon should have been stuck on Cradle for decades. I can understand that. I don't really know how you write that well, though. You know? Like, without that being a separate book. If you were stuck for decades, I feel like we would need a 13th book, which I'm not against. But I do think that with the given time frame that we have set up for telling the story, I think that I remember Will saying in like an Instagram reel or something that Cradle had originally just been like a fun side project between other books that he was more serious about. And it is just really something how that can happen, isn't it? Like there are so many stories like that with a thing becoming wildly popular when the person, whether they're a musical artist or an illustrator or whatever, wasn't that serious about it. And for some reason, the fact that they weren't serious is what made it work because they weren't overthinking it and being too self-important about it. And I just think about that with him. After him saying that, I was struck by it because I've said before, as much as I really enjoyed Elder Empire, I enjoyed like the House of Blades. I didn't love it. It felt both of them were really not as fun. This series is funny and there's a lot more fist pump victory moments. And that's what I liked in comparison to the other series, which felt a little too self-serious. And so I feel like maybe that's why this worked in terms of popularity more than the others, because fantasy can be a little bit too self-serious. That's like one of its downfalls, you know? And he managed to combine a real like humor and self-awareness, but make the magical system just as well thought out and specific as a more serious fantasy. So Asher says, I didn't like House of Blades much at all in general. I genuinely found it like kind of boring. That was my issue with it. Like, I don't know. The characters were not engaging for me. At the beginning, I was thinking, oh, this is kind of cool. I think I see where we're going. And then it seemed to do the same thing over and over again. And I really got to a point where I was like, oh my God, can we get to the point? And I never wound up finishing the final book. But I do like the captain. And that has some of the same energy as Cradle, where it's definitely heavier on humor. So anyway, all right, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you guys again so much for hanging out with me. And don't forget to come next Tuesday to the wrap-up episode. Leave your comments and whatnot in the Discord. And yeah, I will see you then. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
was an Unspoiled Network podcast.